Coming up on today's show, we're going to run through the latest roster moves and news the Falcons made. Plus, we're going to discuss potentially signing an offensive tackle who's got some good NFL experience, and maybe he could take over from Kaleb McGary as he continues to look more like the first 3 years of Kaleb McGary and not the fourth year we saw last season. Before we get into all that, producer Rolly and myself will have a watch party for you guys this Sunday morning, bright and early, as the Falcons and Jags kick off across the pond in London. Now, unfortunately, I will not be there at the start of the watch party. Coincidentally, I'm actually flying back from a wedding in Dallas, wedding in Atlanta. Shame on my friend Kurt. Fall weddings should be illegal. But I will be at the Braves-Cubs game over on Thursday. So if anyone wants to stop by and say hi, feel free to do so. But make sure you tune in for our watch party this Sunday morning between Atlanta and Jacksonville. Now let's get into the roster moves the Falcons made today, as the team themselves tweeted out, "We've made the following moves. Signed Andre Smith Jr. to the active roster, released Isaiah Prince, and signed Chris Blair to the practice squad." Let's start with the Andre Smith portion here. So some background on the Falcons' new backup linebacker. He was a 7th-round pick back in 2018 by Carolina, coming out of UNC. He played with the Panthers, the Bills, and the Titans before coming down to ATL. And he's got some good NFL experience. He has no starts under his belt, but he has recorded a game in 32 spots. So he's got more experience than your average backup linebacker does, or in this case, your third-string inside linebacker does. But without Troy Andersen for the rest of the season, this is what Atlanta's linebacker room looks like. You've got Nathan Landman and Caden Ellis as your starting inside linebackers. Tay Davis and Andre Smith Jr. are going to fill in as your backup linebackers for now. I think this is Landman's replacement, right? That's pretty self-explanatory at this point, as Nathan Landman filled in for Troy Andersen, who was lost with a pec injury. Andre Smith Jr. comes up, and he fills in as the backup linebacker. But let's talk a little bit more about Nate Landman, because I don't think many people, myself included, know all that much about him. He made the Falcons' initial 53-man roster last season, if you guys recall, but then sometime around December, he went down to the practice squad. Now, he was a UDFA in 2022 coming out of Colorado, signed with Atlanta, has been with the Falcons so far his entire NFL career, but he was pretty good for the Buffs. I mean, 2-time first-team All-Pac-12 player in 2019 and 2020. But I'm going to zero in much more on Caden Ellis, because this is a player who got a good chunk of change in free agency, and we've seen good stuff from Ellis so far. 25 tackles, 1 sack. I think he's been one of the better players on this defense. Unfortunately, he does not have his running mate, Troy Andersen, anymore for the rest of the year, so that just means Caden Ellis has to step up even more to fill his void. Now, next up on the show, we're going to talk about the Falcons potentially signing this pretty well-known right tackle to fill in for Kaleb McGary if we do not see a drastic improvement from the right tackle. But today's show is being supported by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy sports app where all you have to do is pick more or less for 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Prize Picks is super simple and user-friendly. I spend like 1 to 2 minutes on the app every Sunday morning making my selections. So if you're in the Oval Office or you're on your way to the game, get on Prize Picks and start making some money. Now, this week on Prize Picks, here's who I'm rolling with. I like more on Desmond Ridder's passing yards at 193.5. The London Jags stink. Speaking of stinking, Najee Harris, I'm taking less on his rushing yards at 52.5. Najee Harris stinks as well. But I do like the more for Stephon Diggs receiving yards at 78.5. Big game between Buffalo and Miami. I think the stars come to play, so give me more on Diggs. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. The link for that is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Switching gears, let's talk about La'el Collins. So, he was at one point one of the best tackles in football, I would say, with the Dallas Cowboys. And then, unfortunately, he got injured. The Cowboys moved on. The Bengals needed a lot of help on their offensive line. So he signed a pretty nice, comfy 3-year contract with the Bengals. He only lasted 1 year in Cincinnati, and then he suffered a torn ACL and MCL in Week 16. He started this season on the PUP list, and then the Bengals just outright released him about a week ago. I'm not quite sure if they weren't happy with his injury progress or they just wanted to go a different direction altogether. But a guy that's got 89 career games played and 86 starts and 0 snaps at left tackle, but a whole lot of snaps at right tackle, is going to catch Falcons fans' eyes and attention because Atlanta's offensive line has not looked like the offensive line that we saw last season. But first, a little bit more background on Collins before we start talking about Kaleb McGary and the rest of this offensive line. He did not play his best ball last year, and that might have made Cincinnati's decision to release him a lot easier, save some money, and move on from a player that did not live up to the contract. 57.9 overall PFF grade. Much better at run blocking than pass blocking, which has kind of been the case for Kaleb McGary as well. So I don't know how much you're improving by moving on from McGary to another lineman that's really good at run blocking, but has the slowest feet when it comes to getting out of his stance and getting to an edge point and stopping an edge rusher to get to Desmond Ridder. But when you look at Atlanta's offensive line, McGary is the guy we're talking about here, right? Or as a lot of people right now are calling him, Caleb Mayfield, which is very mean, but it's kind of funny, not going to lie. Unfortunately, McGary is looking much more like the guy we saw back in the first 3 years of his career compared to that breakout year 4 season where he got the bag in free agency and got a 3-year contract from Atlanta. When you look at the numbers from PFF, they don't really line up with what you and I are probably seeing. PFF has him ranked as the 20th best tackle in football. He does not look like the 20th best player on the field a lot of the time through the first 3 weeks of the season. Overall grade, 70.1. Pass blocking is the issue. He cannot protect Desmond Ridder to save his own life. McGary at times looks like he has cinder blocks for feet. He is not beating edge rushers to the point, right? A lot of times there is not a line in the sand, but there is a landmark on the field, if you will, of, hey, I'm going to try and beat my edge rusher to that landmark to make sure he does not get around me and get to the quarterback. Kaleb McGary, every single Sunday, fails to beat that edge rusher to that landmark. Now, like I said, PFF and myself, and probably you as well, do not see eye to eye when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons offensive line through the first 3 weeks. I mean, they've got them with very nice and generous grades. Jake Matthews, the 16th best tackle in football. Okay. Drew Dalman's looks good. I don't know if he's been top 5, but sure, whatever. We're talking centers. Chris Lindstrom's a top 10 guard. I can subscribe to that. Matthew Bergeron as a rookie is still improving, but all right. Kaleb McGary at 20. I don't know what game or what tape they're watching, but Kaleb McGary has not looked like a top 20 tackle in my eyes. So what's your concern level over the former Washington Husky? He's starting to look a lot more like the guy that didn't look like he would be here past his first contract. And unfortunately, now Atlanta has sunk a good amount of investment into him. And they're not stuck with him long term, but they are stuck with him at least for the short term. So scale it 1 to 10. For me, I'm at a 6.3. I'd be lying if I said I was any lower because he has not looked, in my opinion, all that well through the first 3 weeks of the season. Hopefully we see a turnaround, but the pass blocking, it just needs to get better. There's no other way to put it. He has to have quicker feet. He has to beat his man to the point of attack. He's got to get those hands up. Kaleb McGary has to play better. And if he doesn't, maybe La'el Collins could make a lot of sense for Atlanta.